Hello and welcome back to Media Snack, live from New York.
Greetings from London.
I almost forgot what the name of the show was there. I almost forgot that we had a show today. So
it's been a long time, hasn't it? Welcome back.
Yeah. So we've had I hope everyone's had a good bit of a good break over August. We decided to take a bit of a break from our regular live streaming just for the month. But we're coming back with a big bang. There is a lot of conversation going on right now. As we know, it's been a bit of a tricky year for everybody. And one of the things that's gone very quiet, very noticeable for us and particularly for the agency businesses, has been new business, has been the kind of pitching, which, as we always say, is the lifeblood of agency kind of business. It's a really good indicator. The agencies use their new business success as great indicators on their analyst calls of their varying fortunes and success. But Q2 and Q3 pretty quiet. We were seeing that Q4 this year was going to get very, very busy. Lots of people coming back into the market and reviewing. Having spent a lot of time this year really thinking about their own internal operations and now thinking about how they want to work with their agencies in the future. And we can see it right now. The pipeline of pitches in Q4, Q1, and Q2 next year is big. So we've got this kind of bit of a backlog. Now, we've had much experience over the years running pitches. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I hope we haven't been involved in too many of the ugly ones. But we hear war stories from many agency CEOs over the years of some of the challenges of pitching. And that typically comes down to the way that things have been managed, right, and the resources that they have to put behind these. So it's a very sensitive topic. So we were delighted and surprised, and because I didn't know this was in the works, but very delighted to see that the trade bodies in the US, the ANA, representing the interests of the advertiser, the Association of National Advertisers, it's the largest trade organization in the US, representing the advertisers, and very influential around the world, the ANA, had buddied up with their counterparts, the 4As, which is the agency's trade body, to produce an excellent and very, very readable, thankfully, set of guidelines, best practice guidelines for best practice in working in pitches and working with search consultants. And so we're delighted today as well to be joined by the two principal authors of that. We have Bill Duggan from representing the ANA, and also Matt Kasindorf representing the 4As, and we'll be asking them a few questions in a minute. Are we going to say hello to them quickly?
Yeah.
Baxter, hey guys.
Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thanks much. Really, I mean, so we've said to you before, like a really good piece of work, and so good to see you guys collaborating on this. Really important. So we'll come to you, experts, and you can talk us through the guidelines in just a second. So thank you very much. Right, mate.
Good. It's exciting.
What's going on? What the kind of key topics of conversation then around these guidelines?
Well, there's the first thing that I want to pick up with Bill is that this is not the first time that he's written a set of guidelines. He did it a long, long time ago, I think, in one of his first very meetings at the ANA. So I want to see whether the guidelines that he's authored this time are massively different from the ones that you wrote, 2 decades ago?
Well, everything old is new again, because when I got the invitation from Matt to participate in this project this year, I thought back to when I joined ANA. So I've now been at ANA amazingly for 20 years. Thank you. We're a very different place now than what we were 20 years ago. And the first assignment of any consequence that I was asked to lead for the ANA was a joint ANA 4A's initiative on best practices for agency search. I even remember, so I started in ANA in May, and the objective was to present that to the ANA Board of Directors for approval in October. And I remember that meeting, And I remember being nervous because, again, I was new at the ANA. These board members are the types of people that I would read about in Advertising Age and the trade press. So the date of that meeting, I remember, was October the 14th. And I started by saying, this is the first time that I'm presenting to the ANA Board of Directors. I'm happy to be here, but admittedly, I'm a little bit nervous. You would all make me feel really good and calm my nerves if you sit on the count of 3, happy birthday, Bill. Because October 14th was my birthday. So I said 1, 2, 3. I kind of looked at my boss at the time a little nervously, but that, kind of calmed my nerves and got us going. And they were approved that day by the ANA Board of Directors. So Matt, thank you for the invitation to do this again.
That's brilliant.
Good. So how did it come about then? So just give us a little bit of background to this, because as we all acknowledge that the relationship between ANA and 4As is kind of goes in peaks and troughs, and some very good at collaborating in some places, and sometimes it's been at tension, particularly in the media area, as we're kind of very familiar with. But I know that you play nice and you collaborate for the benefit of the industry, which is hugely valued. So how did this one come about? What was it? How did you get Bill excited about this, Matt?
Well, I was reading through the existing ones and recognized that the business has changed. The agency business has changed. The search consultants' businesses have changed. The marketers' businesses have changed. And it was time to take a look at whether the guidelines really reflected what was going on today in the market. So I called Bill and I said, I was reading through these. I think we could maybe work together to update them. And from our perspective, the 4A's perspective, working with the ANA was the only way to get something like this accomplished and have it make sense, because this really is something that requires both parties to be involved in and to get some consensus on. It wouldn't do for us to just come up with some guidelines and quite frankly not have involved Bill and the ANA.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And Bill, just on that point, and I know that you've written a blog on this. I was on the ANA website earlier on, and within your blog piece, you wrote very passionately about the need for marketeers to take a greater role, greater responsibility in running and being accountable for media reviews. Do you get a sense that your members have kind of taken that seriously? I mean, why did you feel the need to raise that as an issue?
Well, it was important that this piece not solely be directed at search consultants and give them quote unquote guidelines. I felt very strongly that this is a process that has 3 constituents, obviously search consultant, agency, and marketer. And the marketer bears a fair amount of responsibility. So, just a couple of the points, and I know that we'll get into this deeper in just a minute, that, the marketer, it's critical that at the beginning of the process that they provide a clearly defined scope, that is on the marketer. You can't expect the search consultant could comment on that and build upon that, but that is on the marketer. At the end of the process, it's really important for the marketer to provide feedback to all of the participating agencies that spend time. So again, that there's important guidelines for marketers to understand and respect in this process.
Because actually, in the opening commentary of the guidelines, which I found quite inspirational, actually, you talk about the real value that comes from a true partnership between marketing, brand, and agency, and the responsibility of both parties to add value to that kind of relationship. And often it begins with the search of that partnership, right? And if you've got an intermediary in the middle that isn't briefed properly, that isn't being engaged in the right kind of way, that isn't perhaps using the right kind of methods with which to conduct that process, then the integrity of the process, and arguably the integrity of the relationship thereafter, is put under compromise. And so I think that for me underpins the real value of the guidelines that you've set. And just one thing, Bill, before we do perhaps go into the guidelines in a little bit more specific detail, and we've identified 6 that I think we're going to try and kind of tease out a little bit more insight, if it's okay with you, gentlemen. Is how have these guidelines evolved since the ones you guys developed in 20 years ago? I mean, have they become more sophisticated? How have they moved forward, Bill, in the 2 decades since you wrote them?
Matt, I think you might take that one slightly better than me. I'm happy to pile on.
Of course, no worries. So, David, I think the new ones recognize that there are multiple ways of running a pitch, and quite frankly, multiple ways of being compensated. In other words, the way a search consultant is compensated. 20 years ago, it was a very simple, pretty much a single way to do it. And there have been a lot of changes. And I think these guidelines acknowledge those and talk about what best practice might be, no matter how that compensation model is structured.
Yeah, very good. Okay, and we're going to talk a lot about compensation models, perhaps, in the way that search consultants are remunerated, because there are multiple ways of doing it, and I think the guidelines that you've established here provide some real guardrails to, again, protect marketers and the agencies that are going to be involved in the process as best they possibly can. So fantastic. So I'm going to kick off, if it's all right, Tom, with my first kind of question, the first principle with Bill, if that's okay. And again, I want you mentioned it in your setup. It's about defining the expectations of the process. So, Bill, if you can just add a little bit of color to that. Is that because you felt that marketeers in the past haven't done that and they've relied too much on the intermediary to develop the scope? Because it should be a collaborative process, right? It should be great clarity from the client as to what they are looking for from an agency partner, but then the expertise of the search consultant to bring that to life, to engage with the agency community on the back of it.
Sure. So this is a very short guideline, so forgive me, but I'm going to read it.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So the title is exactly what you said, David. Clearly define marketer expectations surrounding the agency search process. And it's only 2 sentences. At the beginning of the agency search process, the marketer should provide the agency search consultant with a clearly defined scope, outlining the marketer's expectation, the roles and responsibilities of the search consultant, and criteria for success. Yeah. The intent is for the search consultant to share this information with those agencies being asked to participate in the agency search process. So think of this as the brief. It's the foundation for the assignment. And, one of the things I've learned over the years is that if advertising is bad, it might not be because the agency did a poor job. It could be because the client did a poor job in briefing the agency. So, Matt and I thought of that first guideline as saying, hey, client, you get, there's that famous line that clients get what they deserve. So that the marketer needs to be thoughtful about the brief for the search consultant and invest time in that, because garbage in, garbage out on the one hand, or a well thought out brief is much more likely to lead to success than one that isn't. It's almost as basic as that. And again, the analogy is the creative brief for a creative assignment. Yeah,
very good. Thank you.
Good. And all of these, I said it up front. I mean, thank you for writing really nice, simple, straightforward principles. Okay, there's a lot of these guidelines can end up running to many pages. This is snack size. We like that, and very accessible. So thank you. And we'll link to the document. Is public domain? Is it, or is it just members only? I should have asked you that.
On the ANA website is public domain. I believe it. I love Vanity Link. I think it's ana.net/ I better check this.
We'll get that.
Matt, how about you? Is it public domain?
Yeah. This is public. Yes.
Yeah. So that's good. We'll link to it. It's recommended reading. It's easy read. If you're a marketer or an agency, actually, and you want to know how this stuff works or it should work better. And I should say as well that as a practice, as an advisory practice, we fully support every single one of these principles. They are exactly what is required, and they're the standards to which we would expect to be working at, which we do work at, and we would expect all search consultants or any other advisory business to work to these exactly these protocols. Very, very, very good. Matt, just moving on to we've referenced. I was really surprised reading this, and one of the real big focuses of this actually is on the commercial model of the search consultants. And we've heard rumors over the years, and there's probably things that maybe it's easy for me to say. But we've heard over the years many rumors of companies running agency searches, running pitches on behalf of advertiser, who seem to be being paid by the advertiser, but also making commercial demands of the agency on the other side as well. And we're not sure whether those are being disclosed to the client. And some of the numbers involved are significant. We've heard some examples, I think some well-discussed examples from last year of a big pitch, which was, asking for a 6-figure upfront entry fee. We don't know to what extent that the client was kind of aware that was going on. So these are clearly, this is big money. It has big potential to be a conflict of interest or influence decisions that might not be in the interest of the advertiser, right? Which is obviously where Bill's setting up. This has to be in the interest of the advertiser and fair to the agency. So just talk us through some of the commercial, because I learned things from this that I hadn't heard, these models. So what are some of the examples that you have seen, and what should the principle be? What do you want? What do agencies want clarity on?
I think if it's okay, let's start with the principle.
Yeah.
So the principle is clarity and being very clear about the compensation, whichever way it flows. So to your point, there are models where the search consultant is paid solely by the marketer to go and find an agency. Very objective way to think about it. There are models where the search consultant is paid by the marketer, and also the search consultant will require some type of a finder's fee, let's say, from the winning agency. There are other models where there's an upfront fee. You mentioned one, to be involved in a pitch. There are others where an agency pays some type of a listing fee to be involved. And no matter which model the search consultant operates under, again, our principle is clarity of practice. So the marketer should know.
Yeah.
Are they the only one paying, or is the agency going to be paying something too? The agencies need to know upfront. And another aspect of this that we suggest is that if the agencies are paying some type of an upfront fee of some sort or a listing fee, that the search consultant should be very clear on the value that the agency is getting from that.
Right.
Yeah. And that's great. How does that Bill, from the marketer side? Because the way that we get that transparency is with the marketer asking the question, right? That is the advice, I think, in the guidelines, is that when hiring a consultant, the marketer or the advertiser has to be clear the commercial model of their advisor.
Exactly. So first, I found the vanity link. So it's ana.net/search consultant guidelines. ana.net/search consultant guidelines.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. So from the marketer point of view, so let's give the example that that you guys have separated, David and Tom. Hope that never happens, but let's give that example. And David charges agencies to be part of the pitch, and Tom doesn't. Well, in the case of David, will he only be recommending agencies that he makes money from to be part of the pitch? That there's a wide range of agency resources, and this is all about one of ANA's favorite topics of transparency, that there just needs to be clarity that an agency shouldn't be excluded from consideration that may be in the best interest of the client. That agency isn't on the payroll, forgive me for putting it that way, of the search consultant. So it's really as basic as that there's lots of good agencies out there, and what we call, I think, was fair consideration of all agencies.
Yeah.
Do you find members of voicing concern with that? Is that an advertiser worry? Do you think that we've heard of where they're not sure whether they're actually getting access to the right agencies because of these things?
One of my favorite A&A lines is, "You don't know what you don't know."
Yeah.
So I think I'd be surprised if many of A&A's members were aware of the different ways that search consultants could be compensated by agencies. They just don't know, the majority of them. So we thought that it was incumbent to share that. And as Matt pointed out, that's really the way things have evolved in the past 20 years, the different ways that search consultants may be reimbursed from agencies. So advertisers just need to go in with their eyes wide open and be aware of the different compensation metrics, and then, insist on making sure that it's a level playing field.
Yeah. And Bill, whilst I've still got you, one of the other principles that I think you just referenced there is where consultants are making money because they have commercial relationships with certain agencies, perhaps not to do with pitch management, but because they're providing a consulting service to a certain agency. So that sits outside of the scope, perhaps, of the pitch process. But your recommendation is that should still be disclosed, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we released this paper in September, Matt. It probably would have been July if it wasn't for point number 4, which is what Dave is referencing now, because that took a little bit of time to come to agreement. And it's headed fair consideration of agencies without regard to the financial interests of search consultants. So it includes any type of commercial relationship a search consultant could have with an agency that should be disclosed to the client.
And whose responsibility is that? Is that the search consultant's responsibility, or is it the marketeer to ask the question?
I think the marketer needs to know. I would, Matt, I would love your perspective on this. I think in a perfect world that it would be great for the search consultant to first offer it, but I think the marketer needs to know that this could happen. They're spending the money for the search consultant. They should ask the question. Matt, do you feel differently?
No, I agree with that, Bill. And I think it is also, I'll put some onus on the search consultants to just, again, be clear about what the business practices are. And if a search consultant has a completely separate consulting arm that works with agencies in another direction, that's terrific. It just should not influence who is being put forth for consideration in a review. That's our going in premise on it.
Yeah. So just a quick one before we move away on the compensation part, which is a really, really important insight in this. Matt, from the how do agencies think about this when they're being asked to either pay to be involved in a pitch, or they agree to be in a pitch on the basis that if they win, then they have to pay a kind of winner's fee to the consultant that ran the process? And some of these commercial models seem, some seem reasonably sensible, some seem a little bit exploitative, let's say. Those will be my words, not your words. How do agencies generally feel about that? Is it cost of business and they just price it all in at the end of the day? Is it just become completely endemic, or do they really actually want it to be a lot more transparent and not have to pay to pitch?
Well, I think from the agency's perspective, and I'll go in and just say every agency makes their own business decision as to whether it makes sense or not. And they need to do that. And to your point, you look at the dollar volume that's involved, and it may be involved in an upfront fee, maybe involved in a back end, some kind of finder's fee, and you make a business decision. I think if I have to say, would an agency prefer not to have to pay to pitch? Yes, of course. But we can't provide, and we don't provide any guidance on whether that's good or bad. It is something that has evolved over time. Our suggestion again is, let's just make sure everybody understands it. And to Bill's point, the marketer does need to know if there are some type of fees, because that may or may not influence the agencies that are being presented. And I think that's one of the key things that drives this, and I keep saying it, but this push for clarity.
Yeah, very good. Good. We're getting some questions in. We're getting some questions in about specific pitches, which I'm not going to read out. But thank you for your observations. You can go and maybe those of you that are actually watching streaming on YouTube, you can probably see those as comments underneath. And we're getting some comments from other sources as well, asking us to talk about specific pitches, and we're not going to do that. Buy us a beer one day, and then I'm sure we'll all have a point of view on various things. Right, what's next? So another really important thing, Matt, and I want to pick this up with you, was and we've observed this, or we've been made aware of this over the years, is that some search consultants using the process of data gathering from agencies, which just seem that the ask is way too big. And I'll talk about some specific examples again without naming client names, but because we're in this business, we sometimes get sent from agencies, and we've got good relationships with the CEOs and the leaders of most of the agencies, big agencies around the world, significant media agencies. They'll send us things going, can you believe we got sent this? This was the RFI request, right? It was like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of Excel asking about all kinds of things on a promise that there might be a pitch attached to this, that may be a pitch that comes from this. And they look like fact-finding coming from some of the search consultants.
Sure.
It looks like companies building databases. And I should point out, some of these were coming not from what we might all know as our intermediary and search consultant kind of, they were coming from some of them from the kind of the management, what we might call the management consultant space, the big four, sometimes issuing very, very, very onerous, big, long kind of data requests from agencies. It looks a little bit like that's out of scope, and that's knowledge building. And we get moans from agencies. So what's the guidelines on that then? What's reasonable and what's not reasonable in terms of an ask of an agency for information as part of these processes?
I think the key thing to consider, Tom, is what information is going to help the marketer make a decision. So looking at, thinking about some of these spreadsheets that are just so deep. I mean, they go pages and pages deep and, multiple tabs all over the place. The question is the information actually going to be relevant and help the marketer make a decision? What we're suggesting in the guidelines is that this type of detailed information be requested only once the marketer is identified. It's an identified search. It's not hey, we want all this information in case one comes along. And it's a fine line, because part of what we believe is the search consultant's business is to know the agencies out there and to understand the agencies out there, to be able to present maybe some new agencies with new capabilities to a client, to have those kinds of discussions. So in no way are we suggesting that search consultants should not be learning about agencies. In fact, they should, and hopefully we'll reach out to agencies and be open to agencies reaching out to them in a very open manner. But when it comes to some of the detailed financial, operational data that can be part of a pitch, our recommendation again is that it be for an identified marketer. And part of it is, let's get away from if you don't provide this, you're out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What we're suggesting is, if there's a question as to what is relevant and useful, and if there's a discrepancy or a disagreement, at least have a conversation. Start the conversation about why it's necessary. Don't just do the, nope, not going to do this. Okay, goodbye. It's just, it's not productive.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll just add to that. I think search consultants, the smart ones, should be in contact with agencies on a regular basis, even when there's no search going on, just so that search consultant can stay up to speed with what's happening at the agency and what their capabilities are. So I think that's perfectly within bounds to schedule half-an-hour Zoom calls with an agency maybe every quarter or so, just to touch base and see what's new.
Yeah.
Good. Bill, just whilst I've still got you, and this perhaps is the final one that we'll have time for, a principle that I found particularly interesting was around public communication of the reviews. Obviously, pitch consultants like to be associated with large, high-profile, media reviews. It's good for their own marketing purposes and profiles. But your guidelines are very clear as to what the direction of that should be. Bill, will you kind of just share a little bit about that, and perhaps Matt, you want to also have a point of view on that?
Yeah, I think it's really up to the marketer whether the review should be made public. I remember back in the day, Ad Week used to have the scorecard of current pitches and who the consultant was. But that's, in my view, up in the view of the white paper, up to the marketer whether to make that public or not.
And I will add to that. I mean, one of the other points in there is that it really is not best practice for a consultant who is involved in a review, and certainly a consultant who is not involved in the review, to make public commentary about the agencies that are participating or the client for whom the review is being run, because it can damage the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'll add to that, Matt. From time to time, there are reviews that maybe ask for too much. And I think, agencies could always say no, but whether it's asking for intellectual property ownership or extra long payment terms, again, this is all a negotiation. I think once that gets out into, once that gets out, I think, any consultant that has a perspective is welcome to weigh in on what they think about what's being discussed there.
I don't disagree with you, Bill. If it's stuff, certainly if it's things like that, which are, again, sort of going against best practices that for the industry, that type of commentary is absolutely welcome. But I think what we would prefer not to see is negative or positive commentary just on a particular agency that's involved in a pitch, or just general negative or positive commentary on the pitch itself from folks who are involved.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's right. And I think as consultants and in the advisory space, we acknowledge our privileged position that we do get to look under the hood of agencies on a daily basis, and we get to know the leadership, and we get to know the strengths and maybe if they have weaknesses, the weaknesses of agencies. That we feel it's very important that we keep that confidential. That should not be part of public discussion. We have that privilege on behest of the advertisers that we work with. And I guess that's why they come to us, because they have a view. They know that we have a view on this stuff. That's not for public discussion. I think that's an important part of the consideration. Again, we're getting more very specific questions and comments coming through, which again, we'll have to bat those away. Thank you, Lisa. Well, particularly, that's a very good question. But for another time, or for a beer.
I've got a question for both Bill and Matt, and I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to answer this, but how will you measure the success of the guidelines? How will you kind of track whether it's being implemented either by the marketeers or by the pitch consultants, and also the impact that perhaps these guidelines are going to have on your agency community, Matt? Bill, perhaps if I can put you on the spot slightly, have you thought about how you're going to track the traction of this?
Yeah, I think it's, basic reach and frequency. You know, I even learned that with the Transparency Project from 4 years ago, that a year or two after we released it, there were some marketers in media positions that were not aware of the initiative. So I learned a long time ago that when you have a white paper done, or when you finalize the white paper, you're not finished with the job just by releasing it. You know, at least half or more of the job is getting the word out. Thank you for the opportunity to do it here. So I think awareness, you know, the metric of awareness is one, and you know, we'll see how many of those negative stories end up in the trade press going forward. And when we do, we should make it a habit to send the folks involved our guidelines for consideration.
Very good.
Yeah, really good. Much appreciated. And thank you again, guys, for the hard work that's gone into it. Everybody go download this. If you're a marketer and you've got any ambition to work with an advisory business or a search consultant, or you're looking for help in your agency relationship, then this is a really good start point as well. I think to both I know the 4As you have a database of consultants, recommended consultants. I'm not sure, Bill, whether you have one of the ANA.
No, we would never have a database of recommended. You know, we certainly when a marketer comes to us and asks who is in the business, we will give them our list, but they're recommended.
And I actually want to suggest we don't actually have a list of recommended. What our list is a list of search consultants who agree with these guidelines.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And also agree with several other guidance papers that the ANA and the 4As have worked on together over the years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Important distinction there. Not recommended, and that's not your job to recommend consultant. I will say that we're registered with you. I think we agree with all of your principles and with all of the guidelines. I think they're very sensible. And we encourage everybody to go read them. So thank you again. What have you? Anything else interesting that you guys have got coming up that you're working on?
Matt, take it away, because
All
we
right.
know yes. So thank you for the setup, Tom.
We do. Thank you, Tom. Last year, the 4As published a paper on relationship management best practices, and Bill and I were talking about that and realized, maybe we could get some data behind it. So we actually have coming out, and I think it's going to be in the next week or so, the results of a survey we conducted amongst each of our membership on the business case for relationship management. And I certainly don't want to give away any of the findings, but there seems to be some good alignment.
Yeah, I love simple things. So, and I'm going to give away maybe a broad finding or two, but have a relationship management program. It's amazing the percentage of marketers and agencies that don't have a relationship management program. Do things like 360-degree evaluations. Again, amazing the percent that don't. So sorry for that little reveal, Matt, but much more in the paper.
Very good. We look forward to that, and I'm sure we'll be speaking more about that as well. Bill, you've got a couple of, well, as always, loads of ANA events that you've persevered with most of the ANA calendar this year, which is great. It's been gone virtual. You've got media coming up, I think, in the next week or two, and then AFM, which was rescheduled for in October. Are these guidelines featuring at all on the agenda for those events for your members?
They are not either. It's not a great fit for media. Arguably, the relationship management could be a fit. But unfortunately, one of the consequences of the pandemic is that live events that used to span over 3 days or even 4 are now condensed over 2 days. So it's just a shorter time frame.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see you and many others at those events virtually, and best of luck with those as well. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on with your members. Thank you again for the guidelines. The links will be down below, and we'd appreciate any follow-up comments. We'll share them with you if we get any further questions.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Nice to see you guys.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Great. Excellent.
Another good example of trade body collaboration. We want to see much more of that. That's when
it's really
these
good.
guidelines become so much more valuable when they don't look like they come from a vested interest on one particular side. And we're delighted to see more collaboration actually that's happening between not just on the agency and advertiser side, but also the different advertiser trade bodies around the world. You know, the ANA, the ISBA, WFA, and many others around the world that are starting to find more collaboration in areas, which is great.
Good.
Well, that's nice to be back. That was
it's good. It's a good start.
Very positive.
Yeah, very good.
So stay tuned. There'll be lots of talk about pitches, I think, coming up over the next few weeks. We're still despite the challenges of the pandemic, we're still very much in media for growth mode. We just still think media can be a force for good and for growth for your business. Stay tuned. Please subscribe to the channel to be updated every time we go live, which is 11 Eastern every Friday from now until the end of time, but maybe not in August. I think actually it was quite nice to have a little break for us and probably for everybody else. But that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching.
See you next time.